Well, I'm doing a bathroom remodel and I need a place to hang some stuff up. So we better get busy. Well, we're here in the shop. Let me show you what I have here. Let's start at the beginning. All right, you can see I've got just a few supplies here. I'm going to be using these robe hooks, 3 of them. Each robe hook has 2 little prongs on it, so that will be 6 little places to hang things up. And I've got a scrap of the Baltic birch plywood. It's a little bigger than I need, so we'll have to trim that down. And I also have some spare pieces of the walnut. So I'll have that salt and pepper, walnut and birch visual combination that I have going in the kitchen where I'm making cabinets, and the cabinet in the bathroom will be the same way. So let's head into the bathroom and check the wall. Okay, here's the wall, and you can see I used a stud finder, and these are the 2 stud locations. They're 16 inches apart, and I'm kind of old school. When I mount anything on the wall that's going to have any weight to it, I'd like to hit the stud behind the drywall. So I've got it marked out here, and I measured it. 16 inches will be our distance between the 2 screws that will hold this rack up. And I want to keep it as far this way as I can so that the hanging things don't cover the light switch down here. So those are just some of the odd things that you take into account when you're building something custom on location. So just to kind of rough cut this piece, let's mill it down to what we need. I'd like about 1 inch or so above and below this round discussion part of the hook. So let's trim this down to about 4 inches in width, or height I should say. So 4 inches from the top to the bottom, and then we'll measure the length that we need. So I'm going to go a little wider than 4.5 so that I can do a couple trim cuts to get it down closer to 4. Okay, that's ripped down to a rough height. And I'm sorry, I almost never build things to plans. Sometimes I doodle out or do a little sketching, but sometimes I just try and remember the numbers and work from my head. So, but I'll try and give you as many of the dimensions as I can as we go along. So we're about 4.5 here. Let's decide how long we want this piece, and then I can trim this down and make some smooth cuts, milling the edges down. Alright, so we have a few things laid out here for you to see. This is where I'm going to just cut this piece off, do a rough cut for length, and then I've got a few center points. So you can see here, this distance between this screw and that screw has to be our 16 inches. But because I want these screws hidden behind this part, I had to offset the center of these by about 9/16 or a little more. And this is where these brackets are going to mount on this line here. The screw will be here, 16 inches over here. This other screw will be here, and this bracket. And then the midpoint between these 2 brackets, these screws are 16 inches apart, and so are the brackets. So this is our 8-inch center line between the 2 16 dimensions. So now that I know where these lines are, we can go ahead and trim this piece up closer to final dimension. And now we'll find our center line between top and bottom. And now I've marked the 2 holes for the screws that are going to hold this to the wall, I'm going to go ahead and drill a slot for each of those screws. There and there. And I think I'm just going to countersink them just a little bit. And before we go any further, let's just make sure mechanically it works and everything is measured correctly to attach to the wall. So I've got one screw in here. Let's drill this out. We're level. Okay, nice and sturdy, level, and now we know everything works. So let's head back to the shop. Now I marked out where these little securing brackets need to go, but these brackets are not very thick metal, and this is only nominally about 3/4 of an inch. So these screws that came with this to mount these brackets, I think are a bit too long. They will poke through the back of this board. So I just took a pair of pliers. These are pretty soft metal, and I clipped the tips off so that these will work. I could have dug around in my junk screw drawer, but these are soft enough that I was able to easily cut them with these and make them as short as I need. So let me get some pilot holes drilled in these so these can be mounted. All right, now that we know all the mechanicals are taken care of, I'll get these back off and we can start working on the wood. First, I'm just going to retrim the ends, and then we'll put a finishing rip along these two sides. First thing I did with this piece of walnut is I ripped it down so that it's about the same height as this. Now I'm going to rip some strips out of it. Alright, I've got 3 little strips, a little bit less than 3/4, just enough to band this all the way around the edge. So now let me get busy and miter these corners, and we'll go from there. And here's how I cut these small pieces. Here's my little piece of trim that I'm going to miter a 45 on. I have a backer board to help secure it and to help with tear out on the back, and then I have a block in front and a clamp that's holding it to the back of the chop saw. And I am cutting it just a tiny bit too long each time so I can nibble into the right dimension. Okay, truth be told, I spent more time fiddling with this tiny little bit of edging than I did anything else on this whole project. So now these pieces are ready to be glued up, and so I'll put some glue on there, I'll tape everything together and let it set up. Alright, it's been a couple of hours, 2 or 3 hours. Get all this tape off here. Alright, so let's erase our pencil lines and get out some sandpaper and see if we can smooth this up. All right, time to get it ready for some lacquer, all nice and smooth. you can see the finish on it. I think it turned out nice. Well, I'm really happy with how that turned out. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I hope to see you right here next time.